Welcome back. This video was originally intended to be part 6 of my series on the symbolism of Donald Trump. It will still serve that function. However, I have become aware that people everywhere are noticing that time seems to be flying by at an ever-increasing pace, and they are beginning to rightly question whether it truly is just an inescapable artifact of aging or something more. As such, I offer this presentation as an introduction for many of the strange oddities we see with time. Hopefully, you will find it instructive and something to ponder. I've been studying the mirror actions of time for over 15 years. Over that period, I have created several repeatable theories for its operation. This has led me to some intriguing conclusions. First, time is a medium analogous to water or light or even air. What do I mean? We seem to exist in cut-off cells of time with a finite lifespan. Whether this is time's natural state or a byproduct of something else, the latter of which I think most likely, is unknown. Perhaps we are derailed onto these cut-off branches in an effort to periodically thin the herd by letting their available time run out. In any event, one of the inescapable elements I discovered is that as time moves forward, the volume of time thins. This means that our ability to experience the events that play in time becomes less and less. Events that could once be felt with a rich, full depth, those terrible agonies and those orgasmic ecstasies, are now merely a tiny scratch or a brief tickle, respectively. Yes, our primitive measurement of the passage of time seems to remain the same, but it's all relative. A minute is still a minute, the same way that a thin man and an obese man are still men. Time, in our case, has become downright anorexic, a starving subject. Time having volume? That's insane, you argue. There's no proof of this. Why, yes. Yes, there is. But, like most things you see, you willfully choose to ignore it. This is entirely understandable. It's how we are programmed. Take, for example, if I were to look at pictures of my grandparents in the 1960s, when I was but a wee little tyke, and they were in their mid-40s, they would look like people in their late 50s and early 60s today. Cars in the 1960s and 70s would be lucky to reach 100,000 miles. Today, 300,000 plus is not uncommon. People will lamely claim that cars are built better today. No, they most definitely are not. Indeed, look at the TV series Leave It to Beaver and the old car Wally acquired in one of the episodes that looked like it was 30 plus years old. In reality, it was only more like 10 years old at the time. People back then bought a new car every couple of years, and car designs changed every year in the 50s and 60s. Eventually, that slowly expanded to designs being changed every couple of years in the 70s, with ever-lengthening spans to today. There is other evidence. These are merely things with which we all can easily relate. Why, boys and girls, why do people and cars and appliances seem to age quicker in the past? Why the discrepancy? The easy answer, of course, is that things are made better today. But no, things consistently are made ever more cheaply. What is produced today is crappy junk. The onset of computers and cars to control things electronically has made it appear that cars today are made better because they run more efficiently. But they are not made better, and we are beginning to find that out. What if time, however, was much more harsh in the past, providing more friction, for lack of a better word, more drag on everything it touched? A higher volume of time causes things to rapidly age, relatively speaking. As we moved into the 80s and 90s and 2000s, the effects of the ravages of time became less and less because the volume of time became thinner and thinner. The Mayans called this the time of no time, which occurs at the end of an age. Indeed, if you were fortunate enough to have cars or appliances built in the 1950s or 60s, they seem to run forever right now. I have a freezer from the 1950s and a stove from the 1960s that just keep going and going and going, like the Energizer Bunny. Why? Why do they still work now when, in the 1950s, they may only have lasted 10 years? The only logical conclusion is that time itself was less harsh over the last 40 years. The objects themselves, which once had useful lives of only 5 to 10 years, did not change. But they were built for another time. Somehow, they have continued to function for 70 plus years. People's aging slowed because the passage through time became easier and easier. Cars started running longer, even though they are continually built infinitely more cheaply. Again, the only thing that has changed with those objects is time itself. The volume of time of each moment was less and less and continued to lessen until around 2020. But how is this possible? Events seem to fly by because there physically isn't the time available for the events to fully play. Imagine time as a huge lake or a wide river gradually being reduced to a tiny creek. Or better still, imagine a movie on film in which every frame is displayed at the beginning of the presentation, but then, gradually, it begins skipping frames. First, 1 frame in 100 is skipped, and then 1 in 50, and then maybe 1 in 25, and then 1 in 10, and then 1 in 5. How is that movie gonna look? Like it's screaming by. Like we are not experiencing the event to its fullest extent. I call this frame jumping, and it's what's happening to us right now. It's the last-ditch effort of time to continue displaying the game. If you are an old computer gamer, you know what it was like to run the latest game on a slow computer. There were times when the gameplay would stop being fluid and the frames seemed to jump around. That's what we are experiencing. With the computer, it was lack of memory, lack of processor capability, a graphics card that was too slow or with too little memory. With us, however, it's a lack of time, a thinning of time. But then, starting in 2020, I believe that our once cut-off branch of time, which we will discuss below, was close to being fully reintegrated into the existing main timeline, and there was a sudden inrush of time from the main flow. We see the results right now, with car parts failing after only brief usage. I mean, I've experienced this firsthand. I've had the fuel inlet hose replaced 3 times over the past 13 years, and the last replacement was only 3 years ago. And yet, after only 3 years, the rubber itself was filled with cracks all around it, as if it had aged 30 years. Newer engines on Dodge, GM, Toyota have all experienced catastrophic failures. Ford has had massive amounts of recalls on its F-150 trucks. Naturally, you counter with things like programmed obsolescence, or poor quality control, or cheap Chinese parts. Well, which is it? Did cars run longer today because they are built better, or are we now seeing how an influx of time reacts to them? If I am correct, we are about to see our world come to a crashing halt because of rapid aging and failing infrastructure. In preparation for this expected temporal two-step, the elite pushed ever more expensive vehicles. To somewhat justify the expense, they loaded them up with a mass of devices requiring complex electronics. They knew that electronics age tremendously fast. Today, many replacement electronic components in cars don't even work right out of the box. The convenient and seemingly plausible excuse is poor quality control or poor design. But is that the real cause? Look around. Have you noticed how rapidly people seem to be aging? How drastic their aging has become? Look at the heart attacks and myocarditis in children. Was the COVID vaccine, which causes heart issues among a host of other ailments, actually designed and created as a way to help mask the effects of the inrush of time upon full reintegration of the timeline? Did it provide a necessary scapegoat to distract you from the real game? This might sound insane, but Stanley Kubrick tried to warn us of this in the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. At the end, the surviving character, Bowman, underwent rapid aging and a rebirth. That is what we are seeing right now. There's also another phenomenon that's been happening since November of 2024. Flashing lights. Go to the YouTube channel, Mr. MBB333. He has over 1,000 videos from around the world documenting this phenomenon. I've had it happen to me. The narrator of that channel hypothesizes that there's obviously a problem with our power grid. Perhaps. But what if that frame-jumping effect I mentioned above has gotten to the point where we are seeing it with lights? We actually began seeing this with something incorrectly being called sheet lightning, in which surveillance cameras would capture a flash of lightning with the light spreading in straight lines. Just what would happen if frames of film were being skipped. But is there any hard evidence of the thinning of time, other than vague perceptions? How about this? Back in 1868, the average temperature of humans was noted by German physician Karl Reinhold August Wunderlich and pegged at 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the temperature that all of us old farts grew up being told was normal. Modern studies, however, now suggest that the average temperature is 97.9 degrees Fahrenheit. That's nearly a full percentage point less. Why? Could it be the very same reason that cars run longer and people age slower? The theoretical thinning of time. Less temporal stress means that the human body doesn't need to work as hard, just like an engine runs cooler that's not working as hard. Could this be the real reason for the obesity epidemic over the past few decades, and not just the processed foods and sugar? No, it's the sedentary lifestyle today, you counter. Well, I argue that certain people throughout time have always been sedentary to a degree. People usually put in the least amount of effort to complete a task. That's the very nature of reality. Water, electricity, people, animals, everything takes the path of least resistance. Reality is pro-lazy in the extreme. How about food that doesn't seem to decompose anymore? Well, that's just processed food, you counter. Perhaps. Or perhaps the processed food argument is simply a believable excuse. Yet another scapegoat. But that's not the most striking evidence of the thinning of time. At the end of my last video on the occult role of the Kansas City Chiefs, I mentioned how 9/11 seemed to telegraph a death for all of us. It was like, in that tragic moment in time, everything ended. We all died, but we didn't realize it. Like various parasites or fungi continuing to live on within a body after death. I asked whether perhaps death itself, instead of being experienced in a tiny moment, had been drawn out over several decades, so that the pain and horror can be experienced as long as possible. This would be analogous to the God of the Old Testament stopping the sun and moon in the sky so that the Israelites could finish their killing spree, as noted in Joshua 10:13. As proof of my assertion, I asked people to think about their perceptions of different eras in time. For example, every decade prior to 2000 had a very distinct flavor. When you think about the 1990s, or the 1980s, or the 70s, or the 60s, or the 50s, or the 40s, or the 30s, or the 20s, the images that come to mind reveal that every decade was its own unique and brilliant self, almost like children of time. They were special moments all their own. But after 9/11, that unique decadal flavor was gone. Cars primarily became white or black or gray, dreary colors of death, instead of being bright and vibrant. Cars and trucks also became hideous. Think the Tesla Cybertruck or the egg shape of just about every car. Or really, any trucks post 9/11, with the possible exception of Ram. Movies and TV started to stagnate to the point that all we had left are poor remakes and reboots. Music became bland and uninspired. Indeed, art itself portrayed an ugliness all its own. It seems that mankind could only revive what had come before, almost as if our lives were passing before our eyes at death, and we were powerless to change anything. Even Super Bowls started having the same participant over and over, with the Patriots appearing 9 times in 18 seasons, on average every other year. Had that ever happened in football to that point? We're now in the 3rd decade since 9/11, but nothing has been unique about any of these 3 decades. It's all the same. Why? What changed? Something is dreadfully amiss, and there is only one logical conclusion. We can't create anything new because we don't exist. We are like fleas on a dog's back, but the dog is dead. Look at the debasing of cultural morals that went into overdrive since 9/11. All around us, society is in a death spiral that is increasing exponentially right now. The body is dead, and we are all either dead or dying. Certainly culturally, and very likely even physically. The most obvious indicator that humanity is dying is found in the global fertility rate. The very year that John Kennedy was murdered is the very year that the average fertility rate peaked at 5.31 children per woman. After that, it began a precipitous drop, almost as if that was the starting pistol for the last days. By 2016, it was down to 2.54. In 2024, just 8 years later, it fell to 2.25. The replacement rate is allegedly 2.1 in developed countries, higher in poorer regions. The United States, Russia, China are all below replacement rates. The fertility rate issue has been worsened, ironically, by smartphones and social media, avenues of instant communication. People used to meet each other at school, or work, or church, or a social event. But people aren't social anymore. And they certainly don't know how to talk to each other. The advent of dating apps sought to bring people together in the digital age. One would think that this would open up the available dating pool to people you'd likely never have met. Even people from all over the world. When it first came out, people were more apt to actually communicate, but not for the past half-dozen years or more. Everyone seems to think that they are entitled to a Hollywood starlet or stud. They swipe through profiles like they are shopping for a new car or a new purse. They have wholly unrealistic expectations, especially women, but also men. And that's why you see the same people on these dating sites for 5 to 10 years or more. But now, we've reached a point of where both men and women have given up on getting married, having children, or having any semblance of a normal life. But is this the real reason men and women can no longer connect? Or is it because we're all dead? Not having children, not being married, not even wanting to talk to members of the opposite sex outside of work. These are signs of death. We are alone, which is how we arrive and how we die. Everywhere we look, we see the death spiral of mankind in progress. These unique changes every decade of the 20th century provide their own evidence of a change in time pointing to a quickening. How so? It didn't happen in the 19th century and before. Prior to the 20th century, these sorts of drastic changes took half a century or longer to come about. Just look at the way people dressed in the 1700s as opposed to the 1800s. Back in 2017, when writing my book, Veil of Evil, I began to take note of something I had lived with all my life. How I see years in my mind. They always appear as a path traveling over land with hills and valleys and twists and turns. I just thought that this was normal. Beginning around 2009, the timeline I saw began a big right turn and looped back around on itself, crossing over 2009 in 2020. This helped me foretell the coming pandemic, and that it would likely begin around 2020. And this brings us to the next logical conclusion. Every aspect of our reality, the old world, revolves around those who rule, openly seeking to kill us. They've always done this. For example, engineering wars or murdering with vaccines. But they've always hidden in the shadows. A new openness began in 2020 with the scamdemic. Why 2020? Because having 2020 vision means that we can now see clearly. Evil stepped out from the shadows to openly take a bow for leading us here. They knew that nothing would be done to stop them, They knew this because they saw the echoes of the future hidden in the past. They are the cleanup crew, the vultures, the ones sent to complete the crucifixion and get on with the Great Reset, the resurrection. Of course, 2020 was when I believe that the timeline was reintegrated with the main flow. The old world will be eradicated so that everything can begin again. This is what they do. But how is any of this possible? And how did we get here? Alas, therein hangs the tale. Believe it or not, there is evidence in the historical record of a massive temporal incursion occurring in the late 1800s. This incursion was analogous to throwing a large rock into a stream. Time, like water, became divided, with a separate timeline being created. And yes, there is evidence of this throughout the historical record. I have written about it extensively in my last 3 books. I know what you're thinking. This sounds like crazy science fiction, and you're right. In response, I simply ask you to look at the data. Come to your own conclusions. The facts I present still remain facts that are verifiable to all. But real scientists would surely tell us if such things were true, you counter. To that I respond, you mean the scientists that only look at what they're funded to look at, while being deliberately steered away from topics like this? You must understand that if my theory is correct, the elite already know these secrets, and they have every desire to keep others from knowing. NASA, for example, wasn't created to put man into space. It was created to keep mankind firmly shackled to the big ball, and they have excelled at that function. So please, join me. Maybe it will turn out to be nothing more than crazy science fiction. But it'll be the best science fiction in decades, maybe ever. Well, except for the Apollo missions. Now that's some good sci-fi. What follows, for those who choose to remain, is an account of that temporal incursion and how events from that time period are actively replaying today. Or perhaps they first played today and were somehow reflected backward in time and replayed in the past. It's all scientifically possible, isn't it? If you found this topic interesting, then please check out my other videos and my books. My website is www.mastersofthemirror.com. Thanks.